I have a quick question.
Hey, Azim. Hi,
Hi.
please go ahead.
Hi, Tejasvi. I
Right.
wanted to understand, like, this was a real life case study that, like, a problem statement that you're working on, right? So, like,
Yeah.
if I were to ask at a nuanced level when the execution was happening, what were like operationally three biggest challenges that you faced, or like any one of the biggest challenge that you faced when you were executing it? Because healthcare as an industry is very unpredictable, and it's kind of like the challenges are very different in healthcare space. It could be related to stakeholders, or it could be related to any other thing. So just wanted to understand, like, operationally, what was the biggest challenge that you faced, and how did you solve it?
No, I think it's definitely the stakeholders, because to execute anything in a hospital, you're moving 300 different people, right? It's not like I just have to go and convince three people. It's everyone starting from the top to all the way, every single person who is facing a patient, right down to, the people who are maintaining the machines. For example, if I decide to change something, I have to make sure they're okay with the change in their schedules, all of that, right? So
Yeah.
I think the stakeholder part of this is the hardest. And I will say every step, eh, when you're working in a system that is already functioning, every time you change something, there is a lot of resistance. So starting with even convincing, even if the data says this is a very profitable thing to do, as you would
Mhm.
imagine, the pushback will be, well, it's meaningless from a top line perspective, right? So yeah, it can be very, but why? So
Yeah.
even convincing people that you have to take a leap of faith, this can actually grow, it can be a much larger business than you think it is, all of that. It's really a question of how can you influence and push and use all sorts of different communication styles to really get everybody on the same page. And that's getting the buy-in. And then when you're actually trying to change something on the floor, that's a question of convincing the people it needs to change, explaining to them what is changing, and then making sure that the change is happening, all of which is very, very difficult, right? Everything from IT systems, different forms. The way the billing was happening was very much around you had only one option of ye product hai. Now you're saying add five more products, so the forms have to be printed differently, or you have to change the system. So there are like 30,000 steps.
Yeah.
Um, and the level of complexity involved is just really, really significant. But that's part of why you do the prioritization to say, is it worth it? I'm going to put a lot of time and effort doing this. The dollar outcome of all of this effort has to be something that is meaningful enough for me to go and do this.
Got it. No, this helps. Thank you.
I think Teju, what you said here, just at the very end, right, which is that for anything when one in an operationally sensitive role, and this could be, when I say operationally sensitive, I mean anything, right, that has complexities, moving parts, whether it's growth, whether it's finance, whether it's product, and of course, then your core operations around supply chain, customer experience. I think this is really, really key, right? That if you want to shake things up, you want to bring about transformational changes, then the justification in terms of how this will work, will it make sense, I think all of that is really, really important. So I mean, all of the folks who are sort of
Yeah.
operations are individually sort of like their own project owners, and like each of these projects takes on a life of its own almost, right, in terms of its potential contributions and impact on the business. I think what Azim asked as a question, and what you were just talking about, is a great segue to get into the second piece, which is in terms of stakeholder management, right? So across your multiple roles, one common aspect that very clearly stands out, apart from the problem solving and the changing context, is just the sheer number of people that you have had to interact with and work with, right? So before we get into how we can think about doing this better, what does stakeholder management fundamentally mean, right? Because there is often a misconception that, hey, if everybody says yes to everything that you're asking for in an org, you must be a great stakeholder manager, which could be great in the short term, could have negative consequences for both you and the business in the longer run, right? So what does good stakeholder management in your experience look like, right? And when does one know that, hey, things are actually going holistically in a good manner with my stakeholders?
Look, I think you're right that a lot of people think about this as, I mean, obviously, it is very important to be able to influence people, right? You have to be able to make a compelling case. Everybody has different styles and ways that they do it. But you have to fundamentally be able to get a bunch of people to agree with you and move along with you. And I think that's very important. But I think the second part of that is you have to be in a place where you're able to get feedback as well. Because I think fundamentally what happens, like you said, is especially in more traditional setups, it's very easy to get the yeses. A lot of the time, it is, I'm the boss, I said so, just go do it. That over a period of time is going to become a negative because you're not getting the feedback back in terms of, is this working? Is this making sense? What are the consequences of changing something or making? You're never going to be able to just rationally predict everything, right? So you need to have, it has to be a two-way dialogue that you're able to have, and people have to be able to come and give you that feedback as well. And I think both of those are very important. I don't think, unfortunately, with this, it's entirely an art. So you are as good as you think you are. I don't think there is a very good quantitative way of saying that, look, if you get 5 yeses out of 6, then you are a great stakeholder manager. I don't think that's the case at all. And I don't think it's necessarily true that if you're sitting with it, you're bad at it, because it's a question of the personalities in the room, plus the context of the problem, plus the degree of conviction that everybody has on the solution. It's a lot of different things. But I think the best way to just think about it is, how do I progressively feel like I'm improving along the dimension versus quantitatively thinking I'm good or bad at this.
And in roles such as operations, right? Or even if you're changing, say, organizations or whatever it may be, given that your stakeholders change over time, right? Even in the same organization, definitely if you're moving across organization, or even more so if you're doing something like management consulting, or you're working, say, in the services industry, like Shogoto is, for example, right? Whether it's on the client side, whether it's the teams that you engage with, these stakeholders can keep changing over time. So even though you may have been doing something for a while, the people or your counterparties who you have to engage with and work with, they may be seeing you for the first time every couple of years, right? In some of the other contexts. So is there anything to keep in mind in particular, right? When you are new in a stakeholder management situation, of course, you have experience, you have skill, you have competence, right? But there is a little bit of earning that trust and getting that buy-in from new people. So any thoughts here from reflecting on your experiences on why this is important, apart from the obvious that people have to align, otherwise things will not get done, and then any advice
Yeah.
on how to think about doing this smoothly, or like what pitfalls rather to avoid in these situations.
Yeah, I do think it's, I will say, especially when you're new, like if I take the Medanta context, you're coming in with a set of your own biases, and then there are a bunch of people in the room who are looking at you with their set of biases. And it's really, you might think you know what you're talking about, they think they know what they're talking about. It can be really difficult situations. I think the one, I don't think you can do away with it. I think you have to be mentally prepared for it, that it is going to take time. You have to, as you said, earn trust. It's not that you can walk in and say, I've done this for 15 years now, you just have to believe me because I say so. I don't think that works very well. I think you have to be prepared to invest in the relationship, and you have to be prepared to invest in building your own credibility with people, right? So what you can do is accelerate the process. You can't do away with the process entirely.